There is something very few people ever tell you about awakening, that after the moment you start seeing more clearly, after you realize the ego is only a story, after old beliefs collapse like a rotten wall, what comes next is not instant peace, it is emptiness. A strange kind of emptiness. Not sharp pain, not obvious happiness, not deep sadness, just a quiet, hollow feeling that lingers. You wake up and the drive you once had is gone. The things that used to push you forward no longer pull you in. You no longer want to run. But you also do not know what you are standing still for. And then a question appears in your mind. Did I do something wrong? Was awakening just an illusion? Did I lose myself somewhere along the way? If you are here, if you are listening, and something inside you recognizes this feeling, I want you to pause for a moment, because this feeling is not failure, and it is not regression. This is a phase that many people pass through, but very few understand. A phase where the old way no longer works, but the new way has not yet taken form. You are no longer driven by the old fears, but you are not yet stable enough to live from a new foundation. Your nervous system is confused. Your brain has lost its familiar map. Your body is trying to adapt to a completely different way of existing. And because no one tells you this is normal, you begin to think something is wrong with you. This video is not for everyone. It is for those who have awakened deeply enough that they cannot return to their old version, but have also wandered long enough in the in-between to start doubting the journey itself. If you feel tired after awakening, if you are standing in an emptiness that no one seems to understand, stay with me, because what you are about to hear may completely change how you see this phase and how you see yourself. Before we go any deeper, there is something important you need to understand about the journey you are on right now. What you are experiencing is not a personal failure. It is not a loss of direction, and it is not a sign that you misunderstood awakening. What you are in is a transition phase that almost no one prepares you for. Most teachings talk about awakening as a moment of light, a realization, a breakthrough, a sudden clarity that changes everything. And while that moment can be real, it is only the beginning. What comes after is rarely discussed, because it is quiet, uncomfortable, and difficult to explain. Awakening does not immediately give you a new life. It removes the old operating system, and when that system is gone, there is a period where nothing seems to replace it. Think about how your life worked before. You were driven by goals, fears, identities, expectations. Even pain had a role. Stress gave you direction. Anxiety gave you momentum. Desire gave you a reason to move. Whether you were chasing success, approval, healing, or meaning, there was always a pull forward. After awakening, that pull weakens. Not because you became lazy, but because the inner structure that created urgency collapsed. You no longer believe the old promises. You no longer fear the same threats. The stories that once shaped your decisions no longer feel real. And when those stories dissolve, something very strange happens. The mind does not know what to do next. This is where many people panic, because from the outside it looks like something went wrong. Motivation drops, energy fluctuates, old ambitions feel hollow. You start questioning things you once wanted badly, and without understanding the process, you assume you broke yourself. But what is actually happening is much deeper. Your nervous system is reorganizing itself. For most of your life, your body learned how to survive inside a certain reality. It adapted to stress. It adapted to pressure. It adapted to constant mental noise. That became normal. That became familiar. That became home. Awakening disrupts this familiarity. When perception shifts, the nervous system loses its reference point. The signals it used to rely on are no longer there. The constant inner commentary quiets. The emotional spikes flatten. The sense of urgency fades. From the perspective of the nervous system, this feels unsafe. Not because danger is present, but because predictability is gone. The body prefers a familiar pain over an unfamiliar peace. And when the familiar disappears too quickly, the system responds by slowing everything down. Energy drops, emotions dull, desire pauses. This is not punishment, it is protection. This is why you may feel tired for no clear reason, why rest does not always feel restorative, why you can sit still and yet feel unsettled. Your system is conserving energy while it learns a new way to exist. Another part of this journey is the loss of identity. Before awakening, you knew who you were, or at least you thought you did. You were someone who wanted certain things, someone who avoided certain outcomes, someone with a story. Awakening dissolves that story, not violently, but quietly, one belief at a time, one assumption at a time, until one day you notice that you no longer know how to describe yourself the way you used to. This can feel deeply unsettling. Without identity, the mind searches for something to hold on to, a new label, a new role, a new mission. And when it cannot find one immediately, it creates anxiety. But this emptiness is not a mistake. It is space where awareness is no longer trapped inside a role, space where action is no longer driven by lack, space where life can reorganize from coherence instead of survival. The problem is that most people do not stay here long enough for that reorganization to complete. They rush to fill the gap. They set new goals too quickly. They adopt new spiritual identities. They chase high states. They turn awakening into another performance, another version of self-improvement, another way to prove worth. And in doing so, they rebuild the same structure that just collapsed. This journey asks something different from you. It asks you to slow down, to listen to your body instead of your thoughts, to allow uncertainty without immediately resolving it, to let meaning emerge instead of forcing it. This is not passive. It is deeply active at the level that matters most. Integration happens here, not in moments of insight, but in the quiet days where nothing seems to be happening, where you are simply learning how to exist without constant internal pressure. This is where awakening moves from an idea into the body. If you are in this phase, you may feel disconnected from the world. But what is actually happening is that you are reconnecting in a different way, one that is not based on fear or desire, but on presence. This video is not here to push you forward. It is here to help you understand where you are, to normalize the space you are standing in, and to show you that this phase has its own intelligence. You are not lost. You are between structures, and what comes next does not arrive through effort. It arrives through stability. This phase often begins in a way that is easy to misunderstand because from the outside nothing appears to be wrong. Your life still functions. You wake up, you eat, you go to work or sit at your desk or follow your routine. People around you see no collapse, no drama, no visible crisis. And yet inside, something feels fundamentally off, not broken in a dramatic way, just misaligned, like wearing clothes that technically fit but never feel comfortable no matter how much you adjust them. This is one of the most confusing stages after awakening because there is no clear external reason for your discomfort, nothing obvious to point to, no event to blame, no failure to fix. Everything is still in place. Your relationships, your responsibilities, your abilities, and yet you feel distant from all of it, as if you are participating in your own life from a step behind. You do what needs to be done, but without the same sense of involvement, without the emotional charge that once made things feel meaningful. The effort is there, but the connection is not. Before awakening, discomfort usually had a clear source. You wanted something you did not have. You feared something you might lose. There was tension, but it was directional. It pushed you forward. Now the tension feels flat, directionless. You are not chasing anything, but you are also not at rest. This is where many people become deeply confused, because the mind is trained to solve problems, and here there is nothing concrete to solve. You might try to optimize your routine, improve your habits, consume more content, seek another insight, but none of it touches the core feeling. Because the issue is not that something is wrong with your life. It is that the internal reference point you used to live from has dissolved. Before awakening, your sense of being okay was tied to alignment with an identity. As long as you were moving in a direction that matched who you believed you were, things felt coherent, even if they were stressful. You knew why you were tired. You knew why you were pushing. You knew what the discomfort was for. After awakening, that internal justification disappears. You may still be doing the same actions, but the story that made them feel necessary is gone. And without that story, the nervous system does not know how to interpret effort anymore. This is why even small tasks can feel strangely heavy. Not physically difficult, but energetically empty. The body asks a quiet question that the mind cannot answer. Why am I doing this? And because there is no longer a fear-based or identity-based response available, the system hesitates. This hesitation is often misread as depression or loss of ambition. But in many cases, it is neither. It is a pause, a recalibration. The nervous system is waiting for a new signal that has not yet stabilized. Another layer of this phase is the subtle grief that accompanies it. Even if you do not consciously feel sad, there is often a low-level mourning happening in the background. You are grieving a version of yourself that no longer exists, a way of relating to the world that once gave you certainty. Even if that version was stressed or anxious, it was familiar. It gave you a sense of position. And now that position is gone. The grief is subtle because there was no clear goodbye, no dramatic ending, just a quiet fading. You notice that things that once excited you no longer do. Conversations feel repetitive, achievements feel muted. And this does not mean you are ungrateful. It means your nervous system no longer responds to the same stimuli. Many people try to fix this by forcing gratitude or positivity. They tell themselves that everything is fine, so they should feel fine. But the body does not respond to logic in this way. The body responds to coherence. And coherence cannot be manufactured through mental effort. It emerges when the internal state and external actions align. Right now, they do not, and that misalignment creates the discomfort you feel. Another important aspect of this stage is that your sensitivity increases. Without the constant noise of striving, your awareness becomes sharper. You notice subtle tensions in your body, subtle dishonesty in conversations, subtle compromises you used to ignore. This increased sensitivity can make everyday life feel heavier, even though nothing has objectively changed. You see more, and seeing more can be tiring when you do not yet know how to move within that clarity. You may find yourself withdrawing socially, not because you dislike people, but because many interactions feel performative. You no longer have the energy to play roles that once felt natural. This withdrawal can feel isolating, and again, the mind may label it as something wrong, but often it is simply the system conserving energy while it learns a new way of relating. This chapter is important because it marks the moment where many people doubt their awakening. They think something went wrong because life no longer feels exciting in the old way. But this is not a sign that awakening failed. It is a sign that it worked. The old reward systems are no longer controlling you. And without them, there is a period of neutrality that can feel unsettling. Think of it as the silence after a loud room goes quiet. At first, the silence feels uncomfortable because your system is still calibrated for noise. Over time, that silence becomes spacious, but only if you do not try to immediately fill it. When everything looks fine, but you are not, this is not a problem to solve. It is information. It is telling you that the way you used to measure okay no longer applies. A new baseline is forming, but it cannot be rushed. In the next chapters, we will explore what happens when the mind resists this phase and how that resistance creates unnecessary suffering. For now, it is enough to recognize this truth. You are not broken. You are not unmotivated. You are not failing at life. You are standing in the space where old meaning has dissolved and new meaning has not yet landed. And that space feels empty only because you have never been taught how to rest inside it. This chapter begins when the quiet emptiness you are standing in starts to feel unbearable to the mind, not because it is dangerous, but because it cannot be controlled. The mind was never designed to sit inside openness without direction. Its function is to predict, to plan, to resolve, to create continuity. And when awakening dissolves the old narrative structures, the mind loses its primary job. It no longer knows what problem it is solving or why it exists in its familiar form. This is where resistance quietly begins. At first, it is subtle, a slight restlessness, a feeling that you should be doing something, learning something, fixing something. You may not even realize it is happening. You just notice an urge to move away from the stillness, to distract yourself, to consume information, to search for the next insight that will tell you what comes next. This is not because you are weak. It is because the mind experiences the void as a threat to its relevance. In the absence of a story, the mind feels unnecessary, and rather than accept that temporary irrelevance, it tries to rebuild structure as quickly as possible. One of the most common ways this happens is through meaning seeking. You start asking questions that sound profound but are driven by discomfort. What is my purpose now? What should I be doing with my life? How do I integrate this awakening? These questions are not wrong, but at this stage they are premature. They are attempts to stabilize identity before the nervous system has finished recalibrating. The mind believes that if it can just find the right answer, the discomfort will disappear. But the discomfort does not come from lack of answers. It comes from the collapse of the framework that once made answers matter. Another form of resistance appears as comparison. You look at others who seem energized by their awakening, people who immediately turn insight into action, into teaching, into building something new. And you wonder why you feel flat while they seem alive. This comparison creates self-judgment. You start telling yourself that you are doing awakening wrong, that you are stuck, that you should be further along. But this ignores a critical truth. Awakening does not unfold in a single pattern. Some systems move quickly because they bypass integration. Others slow down because the nervous system insists on stability before expansion. Neither is superior, but comparison convinces the mind that speed equals success. And that belief creates pressure. Pressure reactivates old survival circuits. And suddenly you are no longer in integration. You are back in performance. Another escape strategy the mind uses is spiritualization. You adopt new language, new concepts, new identities. You call the emptiness detachment. You label the fatigue surrender. You tell yourself you are transcending desire. And sometimes this is partially true, but often it is a subtle bypass, a way to avoid admitting that you feel lost, that you do not know how to live without the structures that once guided you. Spiritual language can be soothing, but when used prematurely, it freezes the integration process. Because instead of letting the nervous system process uncertainty, you cover it with interpretation. The body remains dysregulated while the mind claims understanding. This creates a split. You sound awakened but feel disconnected. You know the concepts but do not embody them, and that gap becomes another source of quiet suffering. The mind also resists the void through productivity. You suddenly feel the urge to organize your life, clean everything, optimize routines, start projects, not because inspiration is flowing, but because stillness feels intolerable. Movement gives the illusion of progress, and progress gives the illusion of safety. But this kind of movement is often frantic underneath. It is driven by the fear that if you stop completely, you will disappear. The truth is that what feels like disappearance is actually deconstruction. The identity you used to operate from is dissolving. And the mind experiences that as death. Not metaphorical death, but existential threat. Because the mind equates identity with survival. When identity loosens, the alarm goes off. And all resistance behaviors are attempts to turn that alarm off. Another important aspect of this chapter is understanding how resistance amplifies suffering. The emptiness itself is neutral. It is quiet, open, unstructured. But when the mind labels it as wrong, it becomes painful. When the mind says this should not be happening, anxiety appears. When the mind says, I need to escape, this tension grows. Suffering is not created by the void. It is created by the refusal to be in it. This is why some days feel heavier than others, even though nothing external has changed. On days when you fight the stillness, it feels unbearable. On days when you allow it, there is a strange softness underneath. The mind does not like this softness because it cannot control it. Softness does not give feedback. It does not reward effort. It does not respond to strategies. It simply exists. And that existence threatens the mind-based identity that was built on doing. One of the most misunderstood aspects of this stage is that resistance can masquerade as progress. You may feel busy, engaged, even productive, but underneath there is a subtle exhaustion because you are using energy to avoid something rather than to integrate it. The nervous system remains unsettled. The body remains tense. Sleep may feel shallow. Rest does not fully land because even in rest, the mind is scanning for the next step. True integration requires something counterintuitive. It requires you to stop trying to move forward. Not permanently, but temporarily. It requires you to let the mind feel useless without immediately fixing that feeling. To let uncertainty exist without resolving it. To let identity remain undefined. This is not easy. It feels like standing still in the middle of a bridge with no clear sense of when the other side will appear. But this is where regulation begins. When the mind stops forcing meaning, the nervous system slowly realizes that nothing bad is happening, that there is no threat, that the absence of urgency does not equal danger. As this realization sinks into the body, the resistance softens, thoughts slow down, compulsion decreases. You may still not know what comes next, but you no longer feel the same need to escape where you are. This chapter matters because many people never move past it. They spend years oscillating between insight and avoidance, between emptiness and reconstruction, rebuilding identities again and again because the void feels intolerable. But if you stay, if you allow the mind to exhaust its resistance without feeding it, something shifts. The void stops feeling like a problem. It becomes a space. And within that space, a different kind of intelligence begins to operate. One that does not come from thinking, but from coherence. In the next chapter, we will explore what happens when the nervous system finally starts to stabilize and how a new way of living begins to emerge without being forced. There comes a point in this journey where something subtle but decisive begins to shift. Not in your thoughts, not in your understanding, but in your body. Up until now, most of the experience has been interpreted through the mind. You thought about emptiness. You analyzed fatigue. You tried to make sense of the loss of motivation. But at this stage, the body starts to take the lead. And this is often where confusion deepens before clarity arrives. You may notice that your body feels heavier than usual. Movements slow down. Your posture changes. Your breath becomes more shallow or more noticeable. You might feel tension in places that never used to bother you. The neck, the chest, the stomach, or a constant low-level pressure that you cannot fully describe. This is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that awareness has dropped from the head into the nervous system. Before awakening, much of your experience was filtered through mental narratives. You interpreted sensations quickly and moved on. Now those narratives have loosened. And without them, the raw signals of the body come into focus. The body has always been carrying the unresolved patterns of your life, stress responses, suppressed emotions, survival strategies learned early on. But when the mind was busy chasing goals, those signals were drowned out. In stillness, they surface. This is why this phase can feel uncomfortable. You are feeling what was always there but never fully processed. The nervous system begins releasing stored patterns, not through dramatic catharsis, but through subtle sensations. A wave of fatigue, a sudden need to lie down, a desire to be alone, a lack of tolerance for noise or stimulation. These are not symptoms to fix. They are communications. The body is saying, slow down. The pace you lived at before is no longer sustainable, and this message often conflicts with what the mind believes should be happening. The mind thinks awakening should make you lighter, more energized, more productive. When the opposite happens, it panics. It assumes regression. But from a physiological perspective, this slowdown is necessary. The nervous system cannot reorganize itself while constantly activated. It needs periods of low stimulation to rewire. Another layer of this chapter is emotional surfacing. You may find yourself feeling emotions without a clear story attached, sadness without a reason, irritation without a target, a sense of vulnerability that feels disproportionate to your circumstances. This happens because the old coping mechanisms are no longer numbing these feelings. Before, you might have intellectualized them or overridden them with effort. Now they arise directly in the body. And because you are not used to feeling without explanation, it can feel destabilizing. The temptation is to search for a cause, to dig into your past, to analyze your psychology. Sometimes this can be helpful, but often it pulls you back into the mind at the exact moment the body is asking to be felt. The key shift in this stage is learning to trust sensation over interpretation, to feel tired without turning it into a story, to feel sadness without assigning it meaning, to feel tension without trying to release it forcefully. This does not mean passivity. It means allowing the body to complete processes that were interrupted long ago. Regulation happens when the nervous system feels safe enough to finish what it started. And safety does not come from understanding. It comes from presence. Another important aspect of this chapter is the breakdown of tolerance for misalignment. You may notice that you can no longer push yourself through things that feel wrong. Conversations that once felt acceptable now feel draining. Commitments that were manageable now feel heavy. Environments that were neutral now feel overwhelming. This is not sensitivity in a psychological sense. It is nervous system honesty. The body is no longer willing to absorb what it does not resonate with. This can create practical challenges. You may feel the urge to withdraw from certain relationships or responsibilities without knowing what will replace them. The mind again interprets this as danger, but the body is recalibrating boundaries. It is learning what coherence feels like by contrast. This recalibration often comes with a sense of fragility. You may feel less resilient in the conventional sense, less able to handle pressure, less capable of multitasking. But this fragility is not weakness. It is a temporary state where the system is open and reorganizing. Think of a muscle that has been deeply worked. It is more sensitive before it becomes stronger. The mistake many people make here is trying to rebuild strength too quickly. They force discipline, they push through discomfort, they override signals, and in doing so, they delay integration. This chapter asks for a different kind of strength, the strength to listen, to rest when the body asks for rest, to stop when stopping feels frightening, to allow the nervous system to downshift without labeling it as failure. This is where self-care stops being a concept and becomes a biological necessity. Not self-care as indulgence, but self-care as regulation. Simple rhythms matter here. Regular meals, gentle movement, consistent sleep, exposure to natural light, quiet time without input. These are not spiritual practices. They are signals of safety to the nervous system, and without them, no amount of insight will stabilize you. Another subtle shift in this stage is the change in how you relate to time. The future feels less compelling. Planning feels abstract. You may find it difficult to imagine yourself months or years ahead. This is not because you lack ambition. It is because your system is orienting to the present moment as a baseline. For a mind trained to live in anticipation, this feels like emptiness, but for the body, it is relief. The nervous system heals in the present, not in imagined futures. As this orientation stabilizes, you may notice brief moments of quiet clarity. Not excitement, not bliss, just a sense of being here without tension. These moments are often overlooked because they are subtle, but they are the first signs of coherence. They do not come with a story. They do not announce themselves. They simply appear when resistance drops. This chapter is where many people think nothing is happening because nothing dramatic is occurring, but in reality, this is where the deepest work is being done. The body is learning that it no longer needs to stay braced, that it no longer needs to be on guard, that existence without constant striving is possible. This learning happens slowly, in layers, through repetition. Each time you respond to a signal with listening instead of forcing, you reinforce safety. Each time you allow fatigue without shame, you tell the nervous system it can rest. Each time you choose simplicity over stimulation, you create space for integration. Over time, this changes your baseline state. You may not notice it day to day, but gradually the background tension decreases. The emptiness loses its edge. The body feels more settled even if the mind still has questions. This is the turning point of the journey, when regulation begins to replace resistance, when the body becomes an ally rather than an obstacle, when presence starts to feel natural rather than forced. The mind will still try to reclaim control. It will still ask where this is going, but its urgency will soften, because the body has found enough safety to exist without answers. In the next chapter, we will explore how this embodied stability allows a new form of direction to emerge, not driven by fear or lack, but arising organically from coherence. This stage does not arrive with a dramatic shift or a clear announcement. There is no moment where you suddenly feel healed, complete, or certain. Instead, something subtler begins to happen beneath the surface. The constant internal pressure that once drove your actions starts to ease, not disappear entirely, but soften enough that you notice the difference. You wake up one morning and realize that you are not immediately bracing yourself for the day. The familiar tightness in the chest or the urge to mentally prepare is less intense. Nothing extraordinary has changed in your external circumstances, but internally the system is no longer fighting itself in the same way. This is the beginning of coherence. Coherence does not feel like excitement. It feels like alignment, a quiet agreement between your nervous system, your body, and your awareness. For a long time, your life was powered by effort. Effort to maintain identity, effort to manage emotions, effort to control outcomes. Even your spiritual seeking was often driven by effort disguised as growth. Now that effort is no longer sustainable, and slowly something else starts to take its place. At first, you may not trust it, because coherence does not push, it does not shout, it does not create urgency. It simply allows things to happen with less friction. This can feel unsettling to a mind that equates movement with force. You may notice that actions arise more spontaneously. You respond to messages when you feel like responding. You move when movement feels natural. You rest without having to justify it, and strangely, life does not collapse. In fact, it often becomes more efficient, but not in the way you are used to measuring efficiency. Tasks that once required mental preparation now happen without resistance. Conversations feel simpler. Decisions feel clearer not because you have analyzed them deeply, but because there is less internal conflict. This is coherence at work. It is the absence of inner contradiction. One of the most important shifts in this chapter is the change in how direction appears. In earlier stages, you searched for direction intellectually. You asked, what should I do next? What is my purpose? How do I apply what I have learned? Those questions were heavy because they were asked from instability. Now, direction emerges differently. It comes as a sense of readiness rather than a plan. A feeling that something is complete and something else can begin. You may feel drawn to small actions rather than big visions. Cleaning a space, reaching out to someone, changing a daily rhythm. These actions may seem insignificant to the mind, but they are signals of integration. Coherence does not start with grand missions. It starts with simple alignment in the everyday. Another noticeable change is your relationship to effort itself. Effort no longer feels virtuous. You no longer feel the need to push to prove something to yourself. When effort is required, it arises naturally and dissipates when the task is done. There is no lingering tension. This does not mean you stop doing challenging things. It means challenge is no longer fused with self-worth. You can engage fully without making the outcome define you. This shift alone transforms how life feels, because much of your previous exhaustion did not come from what you were doing, but from what doing meant about who you were. As coherence increases, the nervous system spends less time in survival mode. This creates more available energy, but it is a different kind of energy. It is not sharp or urgent. It is steady. You may notice that you can be present for longer periods without feeling drained. That silence no longer feels empty but spacious. That being alone feels nourishing rather than isolating. These are signs that regulation has stabilized enough for awareness to rest in the body. Another key aspect of this chapter is the emergence of discernment. Earlier, sensitivity felt overwhelming. Everything seemed to affect you. Now that sensitivity becomes informative rather than destabilizing. You can feel when something is aligned and when it is not, without becoming reactive. You may still choose to engage with things that are not perfectly coherent, but you do so consciously and with limits. The body trusts you more because you are listening. This trust deepens the regulation loop. The more you respond to signals with respect, the more clearly the signals communicate. Coherence also changes how you relate to uncertainty. You may still not have a clear picture of the future, but the absence of that picture no longer creates anxiety. You are comfortable not knowing because your system knows how to be here. The mind still generates thoughts about what might come next, but they no longer dominate. They are just one layer of experience rather than the driver. This is where many people mistakenly think they have become passive. But passivity implies disengagement. What is actually happening is a shift from force to responsiveness. You are not waiting for life to happen. You are allowing life to move through you without interference. This makes your actions more precise. When you act, you mean it. When you stop fully. There is less wasted energy. Another subtle but profound change is the return of desire in a new form. Desire no longer comes from lack. It comes from resonance. You are drawn to things not because they promise completion, but because they feel alive. This desire does not create anxiety. It does not require chasing. It simply informs movement. You may notice creative impulses returning, not as pressure to produce, but as curiosity. You explore without needing results. This is a sign that the system feels safe enough to play. Play only emerges when survival pressure is low. This chapter is also where your relationship to awakening itself changes. You no longer think of yourself as someone who is awakening. The concept loses importance. Awakening is no longer an identity. It becomes a background condition, something that informs how you live rather than something you focus on. This is important because clinging to awakening as a label keeps you subtly separated from life. Coherence dissolves that separation. You are no longer trying to be in a particular state. You are simply responding to what is present. This simplicity can feel almost too ordinary, and that ordinariness is what makes it stable. Many people miss this phase because they are looking for something